Okay, so we've talked about properties of parallelograms, properties of rhombus. So all of these fall under quadrilateral. So rectangle is no different. So a rectangle, most of you know, but the proper definition is a quadrilateral, just like all of our other shapes. This one's just going to be with 4 right angles. So we can see in our picture here that B is a right angle, A is a right angle, C is a right angle, and D is a right angle, which means that all angles are congruent, which is a new definition for us, because parallelograms and rhombuses have opposite angles congruent, which is going to be true for rectangles as well, which is why you can see in the property box that GHJK is a parallelogram. So if it's a rectangle, then it's a parallelogram as well. And what that means for us, again, is it's going to have all the properties of a parallelogram. So opposite sides will be congruent, opposite angles, and we just talked about that all of these will be congruent. They're all going to be 90 degrees. We'll have our diagonals bisect, if I knew how to spell, and our adjacent angles will equal 180 degrees. And lastly, and probably most importantly, our opposite sides are parallel, which makes it the parallelogram. Now, another special property besides all of the angles being congruent, so all the angles being 90 degrees, is a special thing for a rectangle. The other thing that we have is the diagonals are not only going to bisect, the diagonals are congruent. That's our special thing for our rectangle. So you can see here GJ, so GJ is a diagonal, and you also have HK. HK is your other diagonal, so those are going to be congruent to one another. That's a special property of our rectangles, only for rectangles. So all right angles, they're all congruent, and then your diagonals will be congruent. Okay, and we just have one example on the bottom of this sheet. Looking at this rectangle here, ABCD is a rectangle. We want to find each length. So what I'm given in my diagram is that DE equals 6.5, which means that BE will be congruent to it. It will also equal 6.5 because E becomes the midpoint. These are going to be congruent, and since my diagonals are going to be congruent, these are going to be congruent as well. What I know about my rectangle is that BA will be congruent to the opposite side CD, and that BC is going to be congruent to AD, since my opposite sides are congruent. So that should help me with some of these. So in A, it asks you about BD. Now BD, this is one of the diagonals, and since I know ED and BE, I know that BD is going to equal BE plus ED, which means this equals 6.5 plus 6.5, which is going to give me 13 inches for my diagonal, where E is the midpoint. Now CD is opposite BA. That's pretty easy. This one's going to be 5 inches. AC, this is another diagonal. Well, I already found BD, and AC is going to be equal to AC is going to be equal to BD. So So that's going to be 13 inches as well. And then AE. Okay, AE I see has 1 tick mark on my picture, which means that AE is congruent to ED. And so this one's going to be 6.5 inches. Okay, I didn't talk about AD, but I know that AD, if I were to look at that one, AD would be 12 inches. And then if you were talking about any of the angles, the measure of angle A would be 90 degrees, or any of the angles for my rectangle will be 90 degrees. Okay, so do some practice here.